Welcome, Etienne Lacroix, founder and CEO of Vention, a Montreal, Canada-based company who has raised over $150 million in venture capital funding. They employ 300 people. They have over 3,000 clients and 10,000 deployments. Thank you for joining me today on the Reautomated podcast, Etienne.
Thank you, Chris. I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome. So let's get right into it. You build Vention as a manufacturing automation platform, or MAP for short. What is a manufacturing automation platform?
I think the concept was to bring all the step of an industrial automation project in a single digital workflow, from the ideation of a machine or robot cell up to its deployment and operation. And we obviously built that over multiple years. We started with design, enabling our users to create Lego-like, robot cells and automated equipment in their browser, giving real-time pricing, real-time assembly instruction, real-time bill of materials. Eventually, we added e-commerce, enabling our users to basically click a button and receive their IKEA box with all the Lego parts, industrial Lego parts, I should say, for them to assemble and deploy. And then we continue adding the automation layer, enabling our users to program in a code-free fashion or in Python in programmatic language their machines. And lastly, we've added tools to help them with deployment, with a wizard that guide them through the cloud up to the shop floor. And even more recently, the tools for them to operate their machine, get the analytics, get the local support through web as well. So that suite of solution that revolves around design, automate, order, deploy, and operate, bringing them into a single flow is what we define as MAP.
Very good. Thank you. And you talk a lot about the term democratizing automation. I think you and I have sparred. I thought I came up with that idea, but I think that you might have come up with it first. So, what does it mean, democratizing automation? And how does your idea for Vention's manufacturing automation platform play into that ideal?
I'll give credit where credit is due. Universal Robot in 2012 was the one that really started that trend to say it's possible to take with the state of today's technology to bring industrial automation to a much wider audience, right? And Vention arrived a few years later in 2016, basically taking an adjacent route, but with wanted a similar intent to bring industrial automation to all small medium manufacturers. In my early careers, I was working myself at a system integrator doing fantastic type of machine that were fairly complex. And if you look at the vast majority of manufacturing side in the United States and Europe, the reality is most of them are small, medium businesses. And if you're trying to automate,
75%, right?
yeah, and if you're trying to automate with more traditional technology, it's just simply too costly unless you have that high production volume. I like to say there's nothing more manual than industrial automation. And it's simply because to take all the parts from those traditional manufacturers, PLCs, motors, sensors, conveyors, integrate them into a functioning system and eventually deploy them, you need very specialized people. And basically, you end up paying for one, the tech that you're buying, the hardware and the software, but also for that expertise, right? And that basically usually price industrial automation to a point where if you're just a small, medium manufacturer, you're producing a defined amount of units, you won't be able to pay it back. Industrial automation has been solved for high throughput manufacturing plant. It is great enterprise solution that exists, are well proven. And if you're doing high throughput, you'll still have great payback. But if we want to bring industrial automation to the masses, help those small, medium manufacturers stay competitive and build their business, the current offering was just not suited for that. So that I think that's what the whole mission of democratizing is about, is enabling more and more use case for small, medium manufacturers where they feel confident doing them themselves and doing it in a world that will lead to great payback for them.
Awesome. So you've lived this, you said, as an integrator, and your website states, some of your background. We've talked about it before. An avid Lego person, young in life, as I was as well. You built life-size airplanes, downhill bikes, dismantled VCRs. Then you went to work in some interesting areas. So, where did this passion for engineering come from? How did you decide to bring this to Vention?
Yeah, I think passion for product development, which is really where it started for me, has been there for as long as I remember. You touch on some of those stories I often talk about, but at 11 years old, I had this story I tell. At 11 years old, I had this full size plane. The cockpit was a barrel, but I still had flaps and wings and all that I could control. And when it was time to put a motor on this thing, well, I took the land mowers and modified the carburetor so the shaft could work horizontally without the motor choke. I was that type of kid, right? And I always stayed very, very close to product development. A little bit later, around 17, 18 years old, I discovered CAD software, 3D software. And back then it was the early version of mechanical desktop, CAD key ideas, software that don't exist anymore today. But it really, gave me this is tool where I can create so much stuff. And because we say in the virtual world, the cost of innovation is really low, I really got passionate about those software. And they were all installed on my computers. I had them all: CATIA V4, V5, Siemens NX back, it was Unigraphics back then. I had them all. And I stayed very close to that industry until 2014, where that industry changed. WebGL, which is a little library that we use to do 3D in the browser, got good enough to do engineering grade 3D, not video game 3D, but engineering grade 3D in the browser. And as soon as this was true, the workflow of MAP could then take place entirely virtually, entirely in a digital fashion. Got the idea, because of that passion, long life passion for product development, and I connected the dot and say, listen, all the work I've done myself as a young engineers, or even in my former life as a system integrator, can now be done much faster, with much less resources in a single software as opposed to 15 software, if we can bring everything to the cloud. So that was in 2014. And rewiring your brain to move from well-paid job to an entrepreneur takes a bit of time. It took me a year and a half, and we got going in 2016.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So around that time when WebGL was coming out, I thought it was very interesting. Your early model for Vention was really different than I think a lot of other players in the market. You offered a free CAD system, right? In many ways, people sign up to your platform and you don't charge them anything. This isn't a typical kind of SaaS business or some other thing that you'd imagine in the venture capital world. So how did you decide to make this model of kind of a free software and be able to justify that?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Chris. So we, in 2014, 2016 was the beginning of what we call product-led growth, PLG. And we felt there was a very honest way to wire the business, where if we give a free software that enable the user to do all of the work by themselves, I don't have to hire a big sales force. And as a result, everybody wins. And if the software is able to get our users from an idea to a design that they value, right, then I can get paid. So it kind of aligned our interests with our client from the very beginning. And if we're not able to get our users to meaningful design, well, then it's feedback for our product team. Let's keep working on the software to make it better. So I like the tension it was created in terms of aligning business incentive from the get-go. So
Yeah,
we never charge for the software. It's still free. Even today, the software is much bigger. You can program robots, simulate robots online, and all that is free to access. And we get compensated if you decide to purchase your machine. That means I got you to a point where your confidence is there. You trust that this design will work. The software helped you get there, and as a result, it's fair to be compensated at that time.
interesting. Yeah, aligning with customer ideals. It's true. You're making your money on the hardware, and I think a lot of clients will appreciate that as well.
Yeah.
So how did your overall, this background that you had early on in life with engineering, and then you went on to get an MBA from Harvard, you spent 5 years at McKinsey working your way up to associate partner. When you decided to take your education, your background, how did this influence your decision to found Vention? What was missing at the time?
So the deep-rooted passion for product development had always been there. And as you said, I ended up after a few years as a system integrator, then at General Electric, which was a fantastic school back then. And then I ended up on the dark side of management consulting for a few years. And I actually enjoyed it because I work with amazing clients. I've worked in automotive, power sports, power equipment, aerospace, and so many 3D printing, so many engineering heavy industries. So I was able to keep the core of that passion. But at the end of the day, after 5 years of traveling the world every Sunday night and coming back on Friday, um, I was missing three things, and I kept running the same mental test. So I'm going to be a little bit extreme for some listeners here, but one of my mental tests was, if I was to die today, would I be proud of myself? And in management consulting, you work with fantastic people on fantastic problems, but you're kind of the musician who keeps tuning his violin as opposed to play it. And the ability to actually see what I worked when I'm in the driving seat was, something that I wanted to test. It kind of a race against myself to some extent. The second test was, if I was to earn the same amount of money, would I be here today? And you get very well paid in consulting, but life is pretty short, right? I see your professional careers as four chapter of 10 years, and I felt that it's if it's money alone that gets that keeps you there. To me, it's not worth it. Life is too short. So that was the second test, and the last one: are you the right dog race? And I'm a competitive person. I know you are as well, Chris. We're all are to some extent. But the finality of being a management consultant is to be a selfless, trusted partner to others, which is a very noble act, but it takes a lot of selflessness. And I'd like to say that I'm at that level of selflessness, but I'm not. I like to be able to also work for myself to some extent. So that was missing. The finality is to become somebody who serve others. I wanted to do something that I truly believe in for myself. And those three tests keep coming positive over multiple years. And I took the decision to leave the dark side of management consulting to jump back into the passion of product development. And today I'm very lucky because I see hundreds of machines being designed every day by all of our clients over the world. And there's nothing more rewarding because we really feel at the epicenter of everything being developed right now across the world.
That's deep and moving, Etienne. I think you're the third founder that we've had on here, and it's really interesting that the common theme across them is that every founder that we've talked to has had some philosophical moment that they've really kind of reflected on their life and decided to make that leap. And so, obviously, it's to great success with how much you've been able to raise and all the clients you've been able to help and everything like that. It's obviously working. So that's kind of the philosophical half of deciding, what was missing when you founded Vention. What was more on the practical side? Like, at the time, 2016, you probably had some assumptions or, some kind of tests that you were either doing before you took seed money or after. What was kind of the practical aspect that you were examining when you decided to found Vention?
So I was ready for the venture not to work. I had put a couple of $10,000s in the bank account of the company as my personal money, and I say, if in 3 to 6 months I'm not able to get financing for this thing, I'll just go get a real job. So that was the initial construct. I had a fixed timing in mind, and we were running at the time. We didn't have a board of directors, but we were operating as we had one, and we had roughly 10 assumptions, of which I think 5 or 6, if proven not true, there's no business model to build, right? One of them was, will user be willing to self-assemble? Because if they're
Yeah.
not, it's over. Will people be willing to design outside of SolidWorks, which is the main CAD software being used, right? But if people want to stay in their traditional CAD, then there's no business. It's not going to work, right? Because we're going to be only a hardware business, and unfortunately, it's not financeable with VC alone. We had other tests like, will people design outside? So will people be willing to assemble? We had roughly 10 of those. And if one of those were, will people value cost or time? Right? That was a big test. So we were running those board. We had no traction, no client. We were doing those experiments to test which of those hypotheses were true or not true. And that's how we've de-risked the model for the first year and a half. And after that, I think we've raised around 3.5 million. That was the first real financing round or seed round. But we had confidence that we were into something. We knew clients were fine assembling. We knew we could Legofy the experience. We've redesigned, and we were talking to early clients like General Electric and Pratt & Whitney. Says, yeah, we have that software. Believe me, it's hidden. We don't put it public yet. But if you send me your sketch, we'll be able to show you the power of modularity and so on. We were doing everything in SolidWorks in the back end because the software was not existing.
That's funny.
But
Manual on the
still,
back end, everything on the front end. Yeah,
it was
interesting.
enable us to de-risk the part library. Do we have enough component? Are we able to do something meaningful? Are we able to get the users? And how many parts do we need to get started? Vention started with 70 Lego parts. You don't do that much with 70, but it was the right 70 parts to get to the next phase. Today we have 4,000 parts, right? So it's very, very different. So we
Very,
were very, very focused at proving core hypothesis of the business model. And that was true for the first probably 18 months.
so that just quickly kind of to summarize, I think that was around the time of Excel being, your backer. That was kind of the early days. I think you went to Boston and met with some of the founders of SolidWorks and maybe
Yeah.
Onshape at the time and stuff like that. That was kind of how you got rolling in that direction. Is that correct?
Correct. So our first investors was the folks at Bolt, Axel Bichara, which is former, leader at SolidWorks. In fact, I think as I was presenting to Axel, I had in the room what I describe as the father of CAD looking at me and coming in as an outsider to the industry. But I had Axel, I had John Erstick, that was at the time the founder of Onshape. I had John Stevenson, who used to be the CEO of PTC back then, and they were all listening to. Here's a guy from Canada telling us that he can do 3D software better than what we did through all of our career. But they ended up to be an amazing group. They were so supportive. We've built great ties with them. Some of them joined our early board of advisors. A lot of them invested as well. So I'm forever grateful of the Boston community here for all the support they've given us.
Very cool. Very cool. So you spent some time at McKinsey. Obviously, you learned some things along the way. What do you think you used from your time at McKinsey to help you design your team and the organizational structure and really that core ethos or pathos in the beginning when you started Vention?
I think it's ambiguity and resilience. The obviously through what we publish on social media, everything is always great and easy, and I think we have a fantastic team and a fantastic business, but none of them come for free, right? The amount of sleepless night, the amount of time we vomited because we were so sleep deprived, right? Like, there's so many of those events as you build a business, and to stay focused, comfortable, and serene in your head as you do that. You need to be wired a certain way, and McKinsey was a great school for that. You learn how to navigate ambiguity and give confidence when you're surrounded by, with people that are looking at you to know what's the next step. You learn how to do one step forward, three step back, and still stay motivated and focused despite of that. You learn a lot of those things. I remember in the very early days, we were searching for the right persona, right client persona for Vention. And we do this maker group. We do a kind of a client group, a focus group and we invite makers. And I'm there with the two developers that we have. It's a very small team. We're three people. And we're asking those developers, so how much a year do you spend on, your custom automation project or custom project? It says $250 a year. It says, oh, God damn, one Linko part is more than that. So you're not going to design anything. So now my entire team was demotivated. Right? My developer, why did I just left my job to go do this? It's not going to work. So I remember all
Yeah.
those, right? And it was clearly the wrong persona for us. We had nothing to do with makers. But I remember those early days. You still need to be the one that motivate everybody. Luckily for us, that developer is still with us 7 years later, and he's doing still a great thing.
Awesome.
So
Yeah, you talked to me,
resilience, and ambiguity management.
and you talked to me once about, especially in the beginning, about driving customer-facing value. Can you expand on that idea a little bit?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, business are made by their client, right? And one of the mindset we took is the scope we have is really big, right? We try to automate, we try to design, right? And there's so many handshake that can go wrong and that can make the whole experience not as great as you would like. And one of the first thing we did is let's have a mindset where it's always our fault. Regardless of what happened, it's our fault, right? If the client is unhappy for whatever reason and they take the time to give us feedback, just at the high level, it's more constructive to just take it, never argue, and let's go see from their eyes what was wrong in our flow so we can make it better. And I think in the early days, there was a very, very strong mechanism to rapidly improve the business. and create a very strong customer success culture. Right? We take the blame. Sometimes we know we're not to blame. Sometimes the client that we know they've connected something the way they shouldn't, and we can see that they blew up something. But okay, we should have made the product more discoverable. Right? Feedback for us. Right, so we're going to provide the replacement for free. We're going to do what's right for the client. We're going to make sure their machine is up and running. But it was good learning for that. So very focused on the customers as a way to just improve the business model faster. That's really what matters, is improving the business model faster.
Awesome. So you recently published, I think, a much anticipated report called The State of Industrial Manufacturing. And at least for those that kind of keep tabs on the industry, we all know Vention's been gathering a tremendous amount of data for the last 7 years or so, maybe 8 now. Due to your manufacturing automation platform, you're having people coming in, designing things. You can see kind of the telemetry of them designing and how that proceeds through e-commerce, and then now deployment and everything down the line. So you have a tremendous amount of data. And it was very great to see you publish this State of Industrial Manufacturing. What motivated you to finally come out and put this data out on the market?
Yeah. And a lot of it could have been perceived as slightly confidential to Vention, but we felt for the industry is probably the bigger thing to do. Obviously all the data is ID sanitized and regroups and so on. We never publish specific data, but the intent here was to show the world that there's a lot of company today, they're actually willing to embark on a do-it-yourself journey. And it's because a company like Vention, company like Universal Robot really kind of reduce the barriers to adopting automation. And for folks that today are still wondering if they should do it themselves or not, like, here's so many proof points that you can, and you can be successful. So this project about the DIY report was on my mind for a few years already, and it takes a lot of time to kind of get the team going and structure the data in a certain way. And last year in 2023 was our first year. I already know what the 2024 version is going to look like. It's going to be already so much better. But we basically decided to go through all the design that were done by our client in various industry and various business size, and try to see is there a pattern in the way people are leveraging platform to automate by themselves. And a couple of things we found. First thing is, most users of platform like this will be small, medium businesses. 75% of all the users will actually come from those businesses. 25% will come from large enterprise, for example. Now, those small businesses are actually doing a significant amount of project a year, around 2 to 3 per year, right? So they're feeling comfortable doing that. Enterprise clients do more because they represent a smaller user pool, right? An enterprise client will do more project because they have much bigger manufacturing floor and therefore more opportunities to automate. But overall, in terms of adopting platform and democratized automation solution, they're less there than the small medium businesses. And it makes sense because when you're a large enterprise, you can afford the cost of more traditional solutions that are great for high throughput. But for your small medium businesses, now we've shown clearly that people are adopting. One of the things we wanted to know as well is what are the use cases that people are more interested about? And it follows the typical, technical risk, process risk framework where productization reduce the technology risk quite drastically. There's great adoption, cobot palletizer, machine tending, and so on. Where process risks start to be higher, there's still, adoption is much more smaller, and we saw that quite clearly.
Productization, you mean like the idea of taking an application like machine tending and kind of building a standard solution around that or something, right?
Correct, right? When you bring the plug-and-play components, plug-and-play software, often those solutions will integrate perhaps a harm from Universal Robot, but also maybe a conveyor from Dorner, some Dematic from SMC, but packaging this into a very productized solution so there's no integration left. Right? So there's no more technology risk in that project. So application where technology risk could be reduced through productization, obviously there's great adoption on those, and less so in application where it's really, really hard to productize because there's so many different use cases. Take case packing as an example. Case packing based on the goods you pick, it's not going to be the same gripper. It's not going to be the same methodology. It might be one or two. There's a lot of technology variation needed, less adoption in those use cases as a result.
That's where expertise of an automation professional might come in to really help
Absolutely.
to bridge that gap.
Integrators have such an important role to play here because process expertise is really, really hard to get. And integrators that have developed. I was connecting one of our integrators recently. They develop expertise in automated stapling, and that's what they do. That's their and if you want to staple something, whatever it's box, cardboard, one ply, two ply, all of that jazz, they know how to get your machine and throughput. Right? There's a lot of process expertise in there. I think that's where integrators will be tremendously successful. Is as soon as you know that a process expertise. So we saw that. I think for me, what's most fascinating is I love product development, and therefore I love the time it takes to develop product. And we were always wondering what's driving the fact that some companies are going from idea to deploy machines so fast while others are so slow. And you try to find, is it because some users are more expert on the map platform? Is it because some users are in large enterprise or small enterprise? And we couldn't really find a correlation until we said let's try to see if it matched the average product lifecycle of the industry. And that was the aha moment for us, in a sense that if you're an electronic contract manufacturer, you're operating batches that have very short life, 9 months or a year. You value time, and as soon as you value time, you want your manufacturing system to be in place not in 6 months but in weeks, because you can absorb that contract that is very short. So if you're in aerospace, an aircraft program lasts 25 years, even longer sometimes in the military. And as a result, valuing time is much less pervasive than it would be in electronic contract manufacturers. So when we start to look at the industry level, who's fast, who's slow, you can see that almost stack ranking that correlates so perfectly with the product life cycle of the industry. And to me, that was a haha moment. So who's using platform? Folks that value time, right? Folks that value time will adopt those democratized solution, because you can go from an idea to delivered equipment in days, which very hard to do when you're taking more of a project approach to industrial automation.
This is the speed of realization metric from your
Correct.
report?
Yes, exactly. Speed of realization. And we've normalized the data because we don't want to share, which tricks of the industry, but you can see that some industry are very, very fast, and we've stack ranked them versus the other from there. So.
That's very interesting. So one of the things you talk about in your report is the idea of this advanced manufacturing team.
Yes.
And what tips would you give to a manufacturer? First of all, can you tell us what an advanced manufacturing team is? Then can you tell us what tips you would provide to a manufacturer that would be looking to start an advanced manufacturing team?
Yeah, so the AMT, we like to call them advanced manufacturing. They have different name and different business, but to me, the difference versus 2016 when we started Vention and now is most companies have one or are thinking about putting one in place. We serve here in Canada. We serve outdoor power equipment manufacturers, and if you rewind back again at the beginning of 2016, they had no such team. Today, they have a team of 20 people solely dedicated to drive the industrial automation roadmap across one and multiple facilities. Those teams are often centralized. In a small business, might be one technical champion who's probably an ex-system integrator or has learned robotic through school or first job, and now is responsible to drive that roadmap. We often see those teams as core users of platform. They want to have a simple life, and they value that integration, makes their life a little bit easier. And they're really there to bring automation standard across all the plan, maintain the list of business cases, present them to management, select what's going to be automated this year based on the business priorities. So we see those teams bubbling up more than ever. The advice we give companies that are thinking about putting those teams in place is, at the core, this is close to engineering. You need to start with a technical champion. You don't need to have a robotic expert or a program or a control expert, but you need at least the MacGyver of the plan that could do a little bit Python if you learn it on the side, could do a little bit of a robotics if he's going through the training that are provided by companies, by the OEM, but has this curiosity to learn new tech. You need a technical champion. The second advice we give is start with a very, very small project. It doesn't need to be the biggest ROI yet. What you want is make sure you have a decent ROI, ideally below 2 years, but you want to make sure this project is a success because you want management to then believe. We saw companies sometimes taking too much of a bite, right? They're trying to deploy, oh, we're going to do that cell with a 4-axis system plus 2 robots. This is possible, very possible, but as a team, you're 2 guys, it might be a little bit of a stretch. So a single cell to start with, because you want to bring management alone. And at the end of the project, you want to make sure that the CFO or whoever's in finance rubber stamp that the payback you will actually get match what was told in the business case. That, for me, that's the second advice. Once this is behind, then you scale. And when you scale that team, you want to separate initially by skills and not by location. So you want to bring eventually a mechanical designer. Eventually, you want to bring a robot programmer person. Eventually, you're going to bring a control person. But you can stagger them, right? If the core technical champion come from the world of robotics, got exposed to robotic a little bit, I would then go with the mechanical engineers because the rest of the integration, especially when you're leveraging platform, is mostly figured out now. You don't need to learn complex, MQTT protocol and all that stuff anymore. You can if you want, but you don't have to. So I would start my second hire with a mechanical engineer. So we see those teams being put in place. We love to work with those teams. They're kind of in-house system integrators. They're going to usually work as well with system integrators. They're going to take care of project where the process risk is low or where process knowledge is critical to the success. We have a client that they're manufacturing a very complex textile, and they want to own every single piece of that knowledge because they don't want this to leak anywhere, right? So for them, high process risk, but high critical value of process knowledge, and as a result, done by the advanced manufacturing team. What's more common though is the advanced manufacturing team will take the entry level use cases where there's low process risk and will work with a few trusted system integrators where process expertise is needed.
That's awesome. I love that balance of process, versus expertise on that advanced manufacturing team. It reminds me of a conversation we had on our first episode of this podcast with Ben Armstrong. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of his work, but he has done some really great investigation. He's a social scientist working for MIT, and he has done some great investigations into the idea of champions. It's kind of how we call it at Universal Robots, which are maybe a more simplistic idea of the advanced manufacturing team. But he talks about some of the reasons people fail, and oftentimes it's due to the champions atrophying out of the company for $1 more across the street and losing that kind of knowledge or something like that. So it's a really interesting thing, making this advanced manufacturing team, incentivizing them to stay and build and really building a lot of tech around them seems to be a common theme that we're hearing nowadays.
They're kind of the data engineering team that is working within marketing to some extent, right? Now, marketing team will have data team. Now, manufacturing team or operation team, they're advanced manufacturing team as well, right? That's how you build and introduce this the new generation of tech that is much more easier to understand, easier to deploy through those manufacturers.
Very good. I want to ask a kind of a one last set of questions and then move into our speed round. But I like to always ask about metrics and beyond the state of industrial automation, kind of for you in your business to the extent that you can. What kind of metrics do you look for in your business? I think it's really interesting because you have on maybe one side a software, right? Which I would imagine has things like SaaS kind of metrics, right? But then on this other side, you have e-commerce, hardware, and services, really, right? So, what kind of general ideas do you look at to measure the health of your business and things like that?
I would probably we look at all the normal metric between growth in various segment and pipeline and all that. But I think the beauty of the model we've built is we're looking at how the software side that you've described, the SaaS side, is actually feeding the e-commerce side. And for us, we have this unique business model where we have both, and the software side has to feed the hardware side, and we've learned a lot around how to make that work at with more and more higher level of efficiency over the years, and that's really how we're spending all of our time. That will translate into metric like level of self-serve design, but even
Mm.
self-serve design, is it at the part level or is it the design level? Chris, you might do a robot cell that has 100 components. Do I care about the fact that the 100 were added by you? Or do I care about the fact that before you were able to add 50 of the 100, the other 50 perhaps were done by invention application engineers, and today you're at 80 of the of the 100. So I still got you 30% more. So we have to look at all those things and how this then translate into self checkout and reuse and engage all of that flywheel work. So it's
Yeah,
those
there's
that
kind of
love
like,
that, this is a great, it's two business model in one. So there's a lot to
yeah,
figure out.
yeah, it's interesting that you have to kind of marry the software side, which would be like customer retention and things you typically look at with like basket size and kind of all this other. So it's very interesting. Thanks for that insight. Okay, Etienne, anything we haven't talked about yet that you'd like to mention?
I think it's Chris, we've been navigating that industry almost side by side since the 2017, and it was such of a fun ride to see how Cobot took over the world slowly, and a lot of the companies today, the startup like mentioned that have started to do great things, started around 2016, and I think the years ahead will be no less interesting. I think the pace of innovation is picking up. We've worked a lot over the last few years on productization and platforming of industrial automation. I think the next frontiers is really how those platform and those modular integrations are leading to process knowledge that can be trained synthetically, right? Like the world of AI, even though we're still, I think, in the world of robotic, probably a year or two away from use case
Yeah.
relevant for small medium manufacturers, will change the world. So there's a lot of good things coming up there.
Very good. Thank you, Etienne. Okay, I'm going to move into a rapid fire round and true rapid fire. Just give us whatever answer comes to your mind. The first one is, what book are you currently reading, or what would be one book that someone must read, in your opinion?
I'm reading right now a book actually I've read 5 years ago, which is the book about the Netflix culture of reinvention. But the book that I think everyone should read is Amp It Up. Amp It Up from Frank Stoneman is the CEO of ServiceNow. And if you want to learn how to build something fast with urgency, it's probably the most relevant book.
Very good. Thank you. If you could automate anything in the world, what would it be?
My intern program. I would love that my intern program that started every summer. Basically, guys, we hire 40 of you. Well, in fact, just 20. Whoever can build the cart with invention and get at the other side of the warehouse by the end of the day gets the job, right? And that would be awesome. It would be a great marketing event. It would be super fun as an engineers also to partake in that little friendly race. So
Yeah, sign me up. I'm coming up to Montreal for that.
I think we need a little
Um,
bit more scale before we can put a couple of 100,000 words of invention part for the sole purpose of recruiting. But it would be
yeah,
very, very, very fun.
we'll get there. Yep. Maybe this is a question for your daughter, actually, but what's the latest Lego build in the Lacroix house?
Oh, it's funny. Well, it's probably a dollhouse. I have two daughters, one 8, one 4, so a lot of Lego dollhouse. But interestingly, I have all my Lego technique from when I was at 10 years old.
Mm,
And usually, when I play Lego with the daughters, I'm still designing bike suspension system while they're building their dollhouse. So they get exposed slowly to
awesome.
more
That's
advanced.
good. That's good balance. My niece is the same way. She's 9 years old, and I'm always building her dollhouses for her. She calls me her master builder. So I just kind of
Very good.
whip it up, and she gets to play with the horses while I do it. And finally, Etienne, who would you love to hear on this podcast?
That's great. Ah, um, I would love to hear you, Chris, on this podcast. And here's why. You had a chance to build so good relationship with all the actors that are trying to push that industry forward. And you probably have a view that not a lot of us have, right? You spoke with all the components providers, all the software providers. I think I would love to hear you.
Thank you, Etienne. I appreciate that. We try and make it as little about Universal Robots and really about me as possible, but maybe one we can have a meta episode you can come back and interview me,
And share
perhaps, or
your
something.
insight on the industry or where you see the industry going, right? Your perspective would be quite relevant for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah. Text me. We'll talk about it. All right, Etienne. Thank you so much for joining us today. Once again, that's Etienne Lacroix. He's the founder and CEO of Vention. We're really excited to have you as a partner, and thank you for coming on today.
Very good. Thanks, everybody. Looking forward to see you again, Chris. Cheers.